direction sets the stage to turn the page. At the raising of the curtain, I am hurting and uncertain of the parts that we have played. Why must the show go on? I can't say these lines again. Why must the show go on? Must I sing this song again? Fading out of the close-up, everybody's reeling, no concealing. Your beauty is seed stealing. Violins are singing, sunsets waiting, radiating. Your entrance is breathtaking. Why must the show go on? I can't say these lines again. Why must the show go on? Must I sing this song again?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 19 of the Four Wall Sunday Roundtable. My name is Drew Quinones. Welcome to the show. Wow, you can really see this Raider logo. I watched today. I'm excited. I watched the Raiders serve Mahomes' first loss. So, I'm in Vegas now, so I'm super excited. I am joined once again by my co-host, Jeff Kreuter.
Hey.
Jeff, how you doing?
I'm all right, Drew. Hi, everyone. Episode 19. Unbelievable.
Yeah, crazy,
I remember early on, we thought we'd get to 20. Remember that? Before we thought everything would restart and we'd all be back to work and too busy to do this. It didn't take us long to realize that we'd be able to do a few more of these in 20, which on the one hand is exciting because I do love doing this show. But bittersweet since I do also miss working in a theater. I had a small taste last week, which I mentioned at the beginning of our last show, which was incredible and really nice to be in a room with people creating something for the first time in 6 months. Then I woke up the next morning bummed out since I don't know when the next time will be. But it was strange. It was actually like a strange and fortunately very brief flashback to how I felt at the start of the whole mess, but feeling better. Or the new version of better, whatever the new, grading on the curve is. How are you? The Raiders beat the Chiefs, as you said, so proof that anything can happen.
That is true.
How was your week? You had a big family road trip, yeah?
Yeah. My wife and my 6-week-old and my 3-year-old got in a car and headed back home to visit my mom, who is kicking cancer's ass right now.
Amazing.
So, yeah, we went to go visit her. I haven't seen her since December. And with the baby, she got to meet the newborn baby. So it was great. But the drive was interesting because I don't know if anybody who's made the drive between, Vegas to LA, there's like these little oasis cities. It's like a little mini oasis, like a Baker and Prim. And that's usually where a lot of tourists stop to get gas or they have like, I think in Baker, it's like the world's largest thermometer. So it's always like all these mini tourist stops, but it was completely dead. So
Yeah.
like a realization that with Vegas not being open and people not traveling that much, it was just kind of sad. And then I came home and turned on the news, and then they talk about Broadway closing down until May. and the first person I thought of was you, and I called you like 10 minutes after hearing about that.
Yeah. Thank you for that phone call, and thank you to the other people who called as well. And there's definitely been a lot of discussions about it. And the announcement was not a big surprise, certainly to us. I mean, we've talked about this on the show pretty often. Anyone who watches the show should not be too surprised. But while it is big news, Broadway is only one small aspect of the vast world of live entertainment. And still, hearing an official announcement of what we already knew was pretty jarring. But, producers behind closed doors had originally, had always been saying that the original January 1st date was never actually real. So I do take some small comfort in knowing that this new date is something that people actually think is achievable. I mean, people actually really do think, this is the date. So we'll see.
Yeah.
A lot of other areas of live entertainment will come back before Broadway, but we all know not much is happening soon, at least anytime soon. But so much fun today. We're so much fun. This is such a fun show so far. Okay, we have guests. That's why we're here. So we should introduce them and see how they're doing.
All right, our first guest is, I'm just going to bring him in and we'll get started.
Yeah, great.
So Cameron, thank you for joining us. Cameron Anderson, Rachel Hauck, and Rob Bissinger, and last but not least, Mike Carson. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Hey, everyone.
Hi.
Rob, we're going to start with you, my old friend.
Okay.
We're going to start with you. So we're months into this thing, and there's this realization that to a great extent, live entertainment will not resume anytime soon. How are you feeling? How are you doing?
I feel great. Yeah. Well, it's funny. You sent this question this afternoon, and that's probably the first time that I thought about, oh yeah, it's probably not going to resume anytime soon. We've been able to kind of just take this time to enjoy life. I think everyone who works in the theater or any other gig economy knows how to deal with downtime or is used to dealing with downtime. And so for me, for a lot of this, I've just been trying to focus on family stuff and working around the house and keeping myself, in tune with other things, working on improving skills. But just now with the Broadway news and with other news, it's starting to really, it's that thing that wakes you up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I've spent my whole adult life becoming a better set designer and thereby preparing me for nothing else in the world. So there's always that sort of Damocles that's lingering in the background. But having said that, we're very lucky right now to be doing some projects and to be moving forward in some other areas of entertainment. So.
It's not to say that Broadway is the only big announcement. The Met announcing a couple of weeks ago that they were, not doing a season was huge. Cameron, how about you? How are you doing?
Hi. I'm okay. Similar sort of sentiments. I feel that it's a roller coaster where one day I feel okay, the next day it sort of hits me again. I feel very grateful to also be a professor. So I have connections with students and colleagues that continue. I feel like some of the hardest parts are just not being with people and not connecting and making art together. So I feel sad. I feel worried. I'm trying to focus on hope and put good energy out there, and just also very grateful to be healthy and have my family. And,
yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Mike.
Obviously miss live stuff more than the average person.
Yeah.
But I would definitely say I'm in a unique space, so where I do a lot of things in a lot of different spaces. So I think I feel a lot better now than I might have did in March, but I definitely miss, being at front of house or, in a previous suite or something, putting a show together. So
sure.
I think like I said before, I'm definitely in a unique space, and I'm grateful for the space I'm in. But a lot of my friends and colleagues, I definitely feel for who, we can shoot a bunch of virtual things right now, or pre-tape a live performance. But I know that leaves out a lot of people, so that's always what my brain is at. But
yeah,
I'm optimistic though for the future.
So am I. we did skip the part where we ask people what they do and where they work, but we're going to get to that in a second. Rachel, how are you feeling? Rachel's,
there you go. Yeah. It's tricky, right? Like it is the moment where it's sort of the moment where it becomes clear it's going to be another year, maybe, right? Is the moment where you start to think, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
I feel very lucky to have this time to be home with my mom, which is where I am right now. I just got to come home, and so I'm hanging with her. And I'm spending most of my time working on racial justice stuff in the American theater, trying to balance out a little bit the huge inequities in our field. But what I'm actually going to do to make this financially possible for the next year is starting to become a pretty live question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, for you and so many people. So
yeah, right?
We'll have to have you back once you know. or who knows, maybe, November 4th, all of a sudden we're all going to go back to work.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Wouldn't that be nice? Let's go to Cameron. Cameron, what do you do and where do you do it?
I'm a set designer, and I work in both opera and theater. I work in international and national opera and regional and off-Broadway theater. That's what I do. I work on new plays and classics, so kind of a range. But I would say my sort of biggest contributions to the field have been in opera.
Right. Cool. Mike, how about you?
I do a lot of things, but I guess in the context of this show, I design and direct concerts, as well as like live TV show performances for award shows for a lot of artists in the hip hop and R&B space. I also direct content, produce content. Then outside of the live space, music video directing and creative direction for music and brands.
Cool. Do you have someone or a group that you work with generally?
Yeah, so I kind of have a group of, I call like my right hand, the 92 group, which is like my creative studio. So small team of a producer, art director, lighting designer, and some awesome freelancers.
Cool. Rob?
I'm a set designer as well, and I've done worked Broadway and off-Broadway. I also, my partner Anita and I have a company called ARDA Studio, which does other kinds of live entertainments, larger spectacle shows, and also kind of immersive entertainments and architecturally based entertainments as well.
Cool. And Rachel? Sorry, I went to you last twice. I mean, it won't happen again.
No, it's comforting. It's routine. I like it.
No routines. No routines.
I am a set designer. I work mostly on new plays and musicals, off-Broadway and on Broadway.
Concise. Thank you.
Yeah, straight up.
That's it. That's good.
Well, since Jeff went to you last, I'll go to you first. Rachel, where did it all begin for you, and what was your path to get you to where you are right now?
Oh my God, the shortest version ever. I went with a friend to my high school drama class to help build scenery my freshman year, because she wanted to audition. You couldn't audition for the play unless you put in your time building the scenery. So I went with her, and I fell in love with that part. The guy who had made the guy who designed that show and therefore made that model was an architect and a great man. And I just, from that time, fall quarter of my freshman year in high school, that's all I wanted to do was design scenery for plays. So
wow.
I pursued it.
That's amazing.
It's kind of crazy, I think, but it's true.
And here we are.
And Mike, what about you?
I guess my initial start was also in high school doing tech crew for theater. But from there, I didn't really revisit it after sophomore year because video became my focus. So I was directing music videos, doing a lot of things in the video space, and got asked to do content for a tour. And it was a small tour, and I tried my hand at it and just fell in love with it and immersed myself in the world. And then from there, I guess became a designer.
And Cameron, how about you?
I didn't really come to theater until college. I was an English major. I went to Wesleyan University and discovered theater through literature and fine arts. So I sort of came to it through an interdisciplinary background and discovered the idea of a set designer through writing about Shakespeare and the stage and how things were staged in Shakespeare's time, and realized that set design brings together a script and fine arts and storytelling in this really unique way. And so I audited a class my senior year. I walked in the theater department and they gave me a show to design. And that was sort of, the rest was history. I moved to New York after that and started assisting and designing small shows. And that was the beginning.
Awesome. And Rob, what about you?
Well, Rachel, your story is not that crazy. I think a lot of us get enamored early on by a mentor, especially. And for me, it was a middle school, junior high. I transferred to Catholic school. I didn't know anybody. They were doing a play, so I signed up for the play. They needed help with the sets, so we signed up to help build the sets. And I didn't know what I was doing. 2x4s, plywood, but I could work with my dad and work with some other folks, and so that was great. And then I remember the day that this fella came in. His name was John Holman. I still remember his name. And he wasn't a professional artist. He was an amateur artist. But he came in with a piece of charcoal and some paints. And he started writing all over this pile of plywood that we've been putting together for the last couple of weeks. And then he started painting it. And he made a forest. And he made a pirate ship. And he made the Darlings' living room. And I'd never seen anything so magical. And from that point on, I think I was really enamored with the idea of performing arts and being on stage and ultimately set design, which is what I went to college for. I went to SUNY Purchase. I studied set design there.
Heard of it?
4 years, yeah. So that was my journey. Again, I think a lot of us get it, Mikey, too early on.
Yeah, right. And what excites you most about what you do currently, Rob? Like, what does anything spark what you?
Well, maybe not currently. But
not currently.
Previously?
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think that what had been exciting me a lot is that we have been very fortunate enough to work on not conventional entertainments. Doing a show in Vegas. We worked on the Magic Mike Live show out in Vegas, which is a very non-conventional show. Along with that, and also the ceremonies that we did, I have become really more and more excited about assembly, right? People getting together outside of their homes. There's so many ways to get content. There are so many different ways for you to individually enjoy storytelling on a little screen, on a big screen, in the privacy of your own home. But there's something that is remarkable and special about a shared experience. And so the experiential work that we've been able to do was really exciting me. And I was, for me, that was where theater was going. Like I say, now that we can get so much storytelling elsewhere, you got to break out of the proscenium if you're going to get people to leave their house and buy a ticket, right? So it was breaking out of that proscenium and doing things that got people interactive and involved. We did some theme park stuff in China. So exciting to me. That stuff is really, really, really interesting. That's what was exciting me. So the pandemic is particularly, upsetting because it's, well, when are we going to all get together again, right? When's that going to happen? When are people going to feel comfortable?
Yeah, speaking of Magic Mike, my wife did go to that show, and they brought her on stage, so I think she misses live entertainment as well. So
she's a performer now.
She's one of the lucky ones, yeah.
Yeah. Cameron, what about you?
Some similar sort of thoughts. I feel that a beautiful thing about theater related to other visual arts is its ephemeral nature. So it's not a painting that gets hung on a wall. It's only alive when inhabited by actors or dancers or performers and with an audience witnessing. So I love that about it. I love the scale. I love the speed with which your desires are realized. So as an architect, you work for years and you wait for years. A set designer, we have a relatively short window to wait. I love creating the psychological landscape of the play or the opera. it's just thrilling to think of something, dream about it, work on it really hard, and then walk into a theater and see it realized.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And Rachel, what about you?
I mean, I can only stand behind these guys. It's that, you know, it's that live give and take. It's the way you tell a story in theater that you can't tell it anywhere else. It's such a singular thing. But I also, on top of all those things, I super love being in the room with writers and directors while they are, you know, making new things, birthing new things, which is such a goofy thing to say, but it's super true.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And we got a comment from our friends at Limelight Wired. Love that hat, Mike. So, so what about you, Mike? You know, what excites you about what you do?
Yeah, I'll echo everyone's sentiments, and it's definitely the energy of people putting thousands of or hundreds or thousands of people in one room together for like one common goal, and seeing people's reactions when the lights go dim and when the lights come back up. I think it's why I started to go away from the music video spaces, because I wasn't getting that feeling. Once you get it once, it's like you can't replicate it. So I think people and like interaction and, you know, just making someone's day, I think is what I get out of it the most.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
Yeah.
Soon, I'm sure of it. All right. Micro, it's like a little micro and macro question here. So we want to know, from where do you receive your inspiration, both as it relates to your career as a whole and specifically for individual projects? Cameron, let's start with you for this one.
I think the answers are related for me. So I get a lot of inspiration from installation art, from fine arts, from sort of the art world outside of theater, but with immersive experiences. So I find a lot of inspiration there. Also reading about history, reading novels, witnessing the way stories are told in other genres is inspiring to me. And I think similarly for individual projects, depending on the project, I love the research phase. So I deeply research each project. I put together hundreds of images, and it's sort of a process of culling those images and finding the ones that are sticking and won't go away and are, you know, you're seeing them over and over again in your mind. So I would say from an interdisciplinary array of art forms that all feed in sort of to the one creative flow for each project.
Yeah. Rachel, how about you? Where do you get your inspiration from?
I mean, so many places, right? But travel is such a huge thing, you know, being in the middle of a new culture, seeing how different people live, seeing work in other cultures. I find that incredibly inspiring, seeing how other people tell stories. You know, even when I can't understand the language, I find it pretty thrilling.
Yep, sure. Mike, how about you?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Driving down the street. You know, obviously love books. I love a good museum day. I think sometimes you might get the inspiration from a client or an artist. They might have a life story or something they want to bring to life. So I think it varies, but I think I'm the type of person who's like a sponge. So I tend to soak in everything, whether it's like something in the airport or something conscious, like reading an art book or something.
Yep. And Rob?
I thought Cameron's answer was excellent. And I'll start macro. For me, it's the same thing. It's when you get a piece to work on, you kind of dig into it. What was the author thinking when he wrote it? What or she wrote it? What was their environment that they were in? What were they looking at? What kind of art did they see in their world when they made this story? And then the characters. What are the characters? What's their world? What's the art that they are familiar with? And again, it comes from other visual arts, other media, other films, depending upon, you know, the period that you're in. So that's and you know, and again, it's the image that sticks, right? You wade through all of these things, and suddenly you start to resonate with one or two of them, you know, from your own experience. On a macro scale, I would say it's the same. It's the love knowledge for its own sake idea, right? I try to keep myself, you know, avidly reading and active and studying as much as I can of things that places I wouldn't ordinarily go in research, just to keep myself aware of the stories that are being told by other people that I don't know.
Yep.
Because you never know when that's gonna strike a chord in you for something else. So,
yeah. And it's nice to be able to pull, for all of us, just to have that knowledge somewhere to pull it out.
I've always felt that it's our responsibility as designers to go to that very, very high place and bring it to everybody else. Like that's what we're here for you, the audience, is to find that information or find that thing that you didn't think about and show it to you through our lens.
So let's stick with you. So this is a great segue. Thank you. What does the term collaboration mean to you? Throughout the course of a project, who are your closest collaborators?
What does collaboration? Well, I mean, just to say, one of the reasons that I work in theater is because of collaboration rather than just kind of being a painter. Collaboration to me means challenging ideas so that you are constantly always thinking about not just your own little point of view or not just your own part, but the whole part, the whole thing, and listening to what your other artists are saying. That's what collaboration means to me. What was the other part of the question?
Who are your closest collaborators?
Well, you're one of them, buddy.
I mean, thank you.
Jeff. Absolutely. And closest collaborators.
I mean, like, generally speaking. Now, you don't have to name all the lighting designers that you've worked with.
Oh,
please, but do that though for me. Name them all.
It's actually very easy for me. My partner is my wife and partner. My business partner is also my closest collaborator, and she's my favorite collaborator. We've worked together now. We've had a company for over 5 years. We've worked together for much longer than that, and I can just say one of the reasons to kind of further the point, we used to work together, and I couldn't stand working with her because she had such a crazy way of doing it. Like, I never understood where she was coming from or why she was saying it. And I just walked away for a while. I just stopped working with her. And then I was working with people like me, and I was becoming so stagnant and bored with what I was doing and the work. So I ended up, it really opened my eyes to what collaboration is all about. So I suppose if you have to ask me who my favorite collaborator is, it's my wife, Anita La Scala.
That's a great. I mean, that's an amazing sentiment. I wasn't really asking who your favorite collaborator was, but but hello, Anita. How are you? You're doing great. That's great. Mike, how about you? Who do you collaborate with most closely in the course of a project?
Yeah, I think it depends on the project, but usually, obviously, a lighting designer. Usually, my friend Ryan Wiley. If there's video involved, content creators, animators, my producer, who's kind of like my production manager. Depending on the job, you'll probably be working with an artist or an artist management or brand an ad agency or something like that. But I keep it pretty tight. It's usually on my side, like a lighting designer, producer, like creative consultant or two. So that's the gist.
Mm-hmm. Rachel, how about you?
The director is always my partner.
I was waiting for that. So
yeah. Well, my actual partner is a director. She is also my favorite collaborator. But the lighting designer and the director are usually the tightest. And it's, it's an incredible dialogue. I mean, similar to what Rob was saying, it's that, what the collective brains can make is so thrilling. And one of the things that I love more than anything is when somebody in that room has an idea that I never would have had, and it feeds into, the way that those things feed into each other is purely joyful. And you'd never get to the same place if you were working on your own. So I love that about it.
Cameron, how about you?
I think similar answer. The director is obviously the sort of first partner in my experience with a set designer, and that's sort of the ideas are kind of born there. And then I would say lighting designer is the next closest collaborator. One thing I'm hoping happens as we remake our theater in many ways for many reasons is that designers are able to be in the room more when rehearsal is happening, that there's more time that we can be in tech for longer and we're not having to shove our work into these oppressive sort of time periods, but a kind of more European model is accepted, where we're all together for longer and able to nurture ideas and change things. We all know that feeling of getting in the theater and there's this pressure to not have made a mistake or not to spend too much money, right? Like we're supposed to have it all figured out before we see everything together. So I'm hoping that that changes a little bit.
I hope so too. And we, so many of us have been saying that for years, and it's a question of economics as much as anything else. Do they want to pay us to spend more time on a project? And we'll see. Maybe, I think that would be great. I want to ask a follow-up question though about this. So you say your collaborators are lighting designers. When you design a set, do you have a picture of how you want it to be lit? You can all just answer this at once if you want. But who wants to take the answer to this one? You can all answer it. Go ahead, Mike. Yeah.
I usually design with like lighting in mind, and like oftentimes we'll pre-visit early to see like, does this make sense? Yeah. Like given the stuff that I do, it's usually very lighting and video heavy. We kind of cross paths and have to know, okay, we're going to put 30 beams here. We're going to do spots here. So I kind of have to have that in mind before it goes,
It also would be a great segue into video, which we'll get to in a moment. But does anyone else want to take the set and light? Yes, Cameron.
I agree. I think about it a lot. In my rendering process, I often use sort of lighting ideas. I love translucence. I think about how can the world sort of be filled with light in abstract ways and real ways. I mean, obviously whatever's appropriate to the piece that you're working on, but there's nothing like a set that comes alive with light and that you're not just shooting light off the front of it, right? Like that's what people think lighting is, but it's really this organic coming together of the materials and the translucence and texture. So I do think about it quite a bit.
Yeah. Rob, Rachel.
100%. You have to, it's a visual medium, right? So any visual art is obviously based on light coming into your eyes. I was very fortunate enough when I was purchased to study with Franco Colavecchia, and he said something to me early on, which was very influential when I was trying to learn how to render and draw. He said, you paint the light. You paint the light. You don't paint the object. You paint the light that's coming off of the object and going into the eyes. And that has followed through with me. So every time I design anything, I think every architect thinks about how light will move through a volume, how the volume is created in the light. So you're thinking about how the people are moving through the space, but you're absolutely thinking about how the light is moving through the space and how it affects the space 100% the whole time.
Rachel, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I mean, it's, of course, looking for opportunity in the design for light, but actually I wait in often cases. I know where light can come through and move through, and we have major conversations with the lighting designer come in and out of the studio early. But it's always amazing to me when we get in that theater and I'm like, okay, it's yours now. And when I get shown something about my own work because of how it's lit, which I find to be a remarkable experience, and has happened many times. But it's, I design differently depending on who's lighting the show, like because the way that sculpture works and who what that designer is going to bring with it, influences the choices that
interesting.
I do too. I think you have to. For sure. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Well, Mike had mentioned a little while ago that if video has a lot to do with the way that he designs something. So, how often does the decision to use projection or projectors or video as part of design come specifically directly from you, as opposed to it being determined before you are brought on?
Right,
Mike.
I think early on it was always going to come from me because I was just trying to push what I was comfortable in. But I think at this point, I've tried to not lean on it as much. So I'll design something and I'm like, all right, this is good. And they'll say, well, we want to add video. So I'm I'm now on that other side of it where I was the guy everyone hated because I was pushing the video. And then now where I want to get more of scenic chops off, everyone wants video because it's 2020, But I think because of my start, I obviously love video in the context of the stuff I do because we can transform the stage very easily and change it to a lot of different worlds where we don't have as much time to create a big scenic object depending on the artist. So
right,
it depends.
And Rachel, does
yeah, I mean, sometimes the decision, I'm part of that decision, and sometimes I'm not. Sometimes that the director knows they want that element as part of the storytelling, or they assume they want it. And sometimes we get it, we make that decision together. So it's a little bit of both. I mean, I tend to lean away from it unless it's really a specific reason. I never want to illustrate a location. I'm sure nobody does, right? I never want to illustrate a location or a location change through video imagery, and it has to be a part of the heart of the idea for me. And so it's interesting to see when the director leans into that choice and when they lean away from that choice.
Mm-hmm. Do you find yourself ever having to steer them, like steer it away from video? Like,
sure.
You have those conversations.
Yeah. Because often, you'll get a play that is written something like a film, and the director just assumes that's the only way to tell the story. And I find video to be a little bit dangerous in a play because you can lose the play to it. You can lose the play to that imagery. So,
it's not a film. That's the thing. The fact is, it's actually a theater piece and it's not a film. And if you want it to be a film, then do a film. If you want video, maybe it should be a film.
Yeah. And so sometimes I'm a little more resistant than I should be.
Okay.
And recently I just made the case massively the other way around, where we got almost through the process. And I was like, we have to add video, and we're adding it in a massive, massive way.
Wow.
And that was tricky.
Sure.
And Cameron, how about you?
Similar. I think sometimes it has come from me. Sometimes it's been a decision made in advance. I have designed video for several of the sets that I've designed. So that's been really exciting to think about layering it in from the beginning. I agree with what Rachel said about it's very dangerous in plays because it does become so illustrative, but in opera and in more sort of abstract epic pieces, I think video can be really exciting if used intelligently. But I have the same sort of anecdote. A friend who's a video designer, Katie Tucker, when she's asked to do something, the first thing she does is try to convince the director not to hire a video designer so that she can really hear what they want. So I want to laugh about that.
I had that experience recently. Someone, I forget who the projection designer was. Oh, I think it was Wendell. It was when Harrington talked the show out of using projections on the show. And she wasn't wrong. They pitched the whole thing to her, and she said, "You don't. This is a bad idea. Just do it with light and scenery." And so they did, and it was great. Probably would have been great if she did projections too. Maybe she was just busy. I don't know. Rob. Sorry to interrupt.
I've never been the one to introduce projection into a show. I think now, meaning when we start again, we are in a great place in that projection, I think, is becoming less precious. There's been so many technological advancements in both lighting and projection that more and more, when we use projections in shows, it becomes a kind of a seamless part of the lighting, right? So there's projected imagery, but it's also part of the light. Always, like Rachel and Cameron were saying, whenever it's woven in is, of course, when it works best. And similarly, I always, when someone says, hey, we want to have projection, I always say, well, what are you doing with the projection? Because to me, it's like, hey, I want to build a giant picture window on this wall, only to discover that the view is the brick wall next door. So it's kind of like, what are we seeing? What are we seeing? And is projection the best way to see it? And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. So I think I feel very excited now that it's becoming so. There's so many different ways to project imagery, and there's so many ways to use lighting and projection together. I just think it's going to be another tool in the box, and I think people are going to not approach it like, let's have a projection anymore.
Sure. Yeah. A follow up to this now, the between like projection screens and LED panels and video panels and front projection, do you guys as set designers make those choices? Do you care what it is one way or the other? Is it show specific? Rachel?
Totally care what that equipment is, how we control the imagery. I have super strong opinions about it. And sometimes you have more ability in terms of the space itself and the design itself to make more than one version possible. And sometimes it just has to be one thing.
Sure.
But yeah, it depends on what the imagery is and how you're using it and what that equipment is. And, of course, deferring to the people who actually know what they're talking about.
Sure.
But enough information to know that some things are terrible ideas and some things will work better. And
so it's really a case-by-case basis. You don't have a particular favorite, but show by show. Does anyone else want to add anything to that? Mike, yeah.
I prefer LED, just I guess because I'm in the concert space and like the cell phone just ruins projection because everyone's cell phone
things I would never have thought of.
Yeah, I love projection. I think it's definitely more beautiful and more photogenic, but every time we try to incorporate it, unless it's just at like a massive scale, it gets washed out by cell phone lights.
Or lighting designers, for that matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone else want to add anything to that? LED screens or front, projectors? The thing about a projector is, as a lighting designer, it's a massive light source. So I'm always, curious what that's going to be. I know that if there's a giant projector dead center on the balcony rail shooting straight in, it's not the most, it's not the most interesting place to put light. So I'm always concerned about that.
Well, that's what I like about, I think, Mike, you would probably know better than me, but what I like about the LED is that you can turn it off, right? The image is there and then it's gone. Whereas the projector, you can't project black, right? So any LED, you get so much more contrast. But again, so it's a case by case. It's what are you showing? Where is it in the space? How present is it? What's it for? All those questions will determine how many layers of gauze I'm going to put on top of it.
Right, or screen or something. Right.
I mean, your question made me think about Simon McBurney, right? Who will shoot an image on top of anything moving, and it will come and go, and you won't even know where or how. It's so ephemeral, and then it's gone. Which is like, just I don't know why that came to mind, but that's such an interesting way to use fleeting imagery.
Fleeting imagery, yeah, sure. Okay, so when you're designing, you sit down, you have a show, you read it, listen to it, look at it. Do you consider budget right away? Or at what point do you consider budget when starting a new design? Or do you design with budget in mind, or do you just aim for the sky and hope someone will pay for it? Rob, we're going to stick with you here. Yeah. How does that, I know every designer has their own way of working. And I will add that I've been in meetings with people, with set designers who pitch an idea, and I know that it's never going to happen. But it's always interesting to hear the pitch, to hear what they have to say. Sometimes I wish I could have that hour back, and sometimes it's useful information. Rob, sorry, go ahead.
I think I don't design with budget in mind per se. But having said that, what I'm always looking for is what's the idea? What's the visual thrust? What's the concept of what I'm trying to do here? What do I want the audience to take away mostly visually? And then once I know what that is, that can be usually that can expand and contract with budget, right? I can get that same idea across depending on what my resources are. On occasion, a show will or an experience will demand a certain element in my mind that I will then fight for. But and then you just get into the politics of knowing who you're dealing with and kind of guessing, what they'll really go for. Because I feel like I'm lied to every time a producer gives me a job and a budget. I feel like they're not really telling me how much they actually have. So I think it's guessing how much it is, and also it's priorities too, right? They may decide that especially when you're doing non-traditional theater where it's like you need so much lighting, costumes, and set. If you're doing an environment where a certain idea is very strong, a producer might choose to put a little bit more money into that and say, okay, well, if we do that, I don't need to necessarily do what I was going to do over here, right? So it's a little more fluid as well. So I think that's usually how I approach it. But you're wasting your time to not acknowledge the budget, and also a good idea can work on many budgets, I think.
Yeah, sure. Mike, how about you in your world?
I think the initial goal or story of the show, I try to think about budget aside, but as far as actuality and what we're building or what we're lighting or things like that, you obviously have to think about budget, or you're going to waste 2 weeks or a month. designing this cool thing that can't fit in a truck or can't fit in, a trailer. It's too small, So
yeah, absolutely. And it's hard. I mean, if you don't think about budget, and listen, everyone works differently, and every project is different. But if you over design, or if you design something that's not affordable, you have that choice of like whittling away at it or just scrapping it and starting over. And it's always hard to know where to go. Rachel, how about you?
I'm super inconsistent about this. And I feel like, Jeff, I probably owe you a couple hours back.
No. Actually, you don't. You absolutely don't. I wouldn't have said that if that were true. So no, you don't.
I mean, it depends, you have to know who you're designing for and what the space can accommodate and what is technically possible within sort of the means of the theater. And also find the idea. And sometimes the ideas are bigger than the space can accommodate. And sometimes you never know when the thing that you thought was going to be impossible for a theater is the thing they have sitting in the basement. I mean, it happens so many weird times.
Sure.
So you're crazy to not ask for what you're most interested in. And also, I've probably lost a lot of weeks of my life to thinking too big, and finding your way back.
You've never wasted my time. I don't believe I've ever done a show with you where you've been that far over budget either. So there you go. Cameron, how about you?
I think similar ideas. I think I tend to err on the side of big and then pull back once everything is coming into focus. But like everyone else has said, if you completely neglect the budget and the what is possible with the crew size and the load-in time and all of those things, you lead people down a garden path that's not possible. So I feel like it's a combination of respect the theater, respecting each other, but nurturing the seed of that idea and not letting go of it and not becoming obsessed with the budget. I think that, that formula that I just described ends up meaning that, coming in with things that are bigger, but I'm always also thinking about ways I could change it slightly to make it less expensive. I know we all do this as tricks. We have these things that we know we can cut. But it's just a smart way to think about it, because then you have, instead of scrapping, unless you need to, you have sort of built.
You have a place to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, somewhere to go. This is an extreme example, but I actually just thought of a show that I was doing a couple of years ago where the set came in so far over budget. This is a true story. The set came in, it was so far over budget at bid that they fired everybody. I mean, like the director down. They just
oh my God.
They just decided to start like late in the process. They were like, all right, well, we're not going to do your production because we can't.
That's amazing.
But that, I don't think that happens every day. Also, I don't think that people doing the hiring were necessarily reputable anyway. So there you go.
I worked on a show that came in way over budget, and they just paid for it, and it was terrible. Somebody really should have said, this is too much.
I think I may know what you were talking about.
Yeah, probably.
We have a comment. Yeah, from Pete Weatherhead. Performers can be fussy, or so I hear. Considering their needs, desires when designing a set, say how they need to dance or exit to make a quick change, feel like a fun, challenging part of your process, or hindering? Mike, I'll go to you.
Well, I'll first say it's necessary, right? Because if somebody's like a dancer and they're a pop star or something, that's the most important thing, as opposed to like how cool the lights look. So I would say it's definitely, it could be challenging. It could be challenging when it comes up like in the 24th hour. Yeah. So when it's not thought about initially, or like the conversation wasn't had, or it was like, oh, we're gonna add 10 people on the stage, and you're like, this was designed for 2 people. I think that's where it becomes challenging. But I've learned to like try to think about these things earlier on and not get caught in like ego about like, but the set, because at the end of the day, it's like about the performer usually, if they're good, I guess. Yeah.
And Rachel?
I actually love thinking about that, and I really love designing for actors I know and I've worked with, including the wonderful Kate Weatherhead, because it's integral to how the space is, if the space is messed up once there's performers on it, you fail, right? Like how people move through space, how they use the space, making it possible for them to, again, find it, for the performers to teach you something about your own world. Mm-hmm. I love when that happens. I designed a play for Heidi Schreck a while ago, and she is an actor before she's a writer, or has done both together for many, many years. And I will never forget her saying, give them something to sit on, but make it the wrong thing, which I loved, like as a playwright's instruction. It was exciting. But yes, how people move through that space and interact with that space I actually love that part of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Right. And Cameron?
Similar response. I think, the human figure is what we're constantly thinking about when we're designing the proportions, the relationship, the stage picture, the balance, the asymmetry, the symmetry. Also, some of the operas I work on, there's 50 people in a chorus that have to be on stage. So you're thinking about the movement of a mass of people who are also not trained movers. So you have to design a space where people can look elegant who are not they're trained to sing, right? So it really depends on the genre. I think it's so critical in theater, in naturalistic theater also, so that people can feel as natural as possible. I think it depends if you're trying to create sort of an uncomfortable, exaggerated environment. I think it can be fun to play with those things, but everyone has to be on board for that. It can't be that the set designer is bringing this idea and no one's in on it. But I think it really depends on the genre that you're working in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And before you answer, Rob, and everybody can take it if you have an answer too, but do you have an instance that you did design something and it was like a learning experience for you where the performers said like, oh, this isn't working or anything like that? Rob?
Well, I was gonna say that I would echo what everyone else is saying. But to further kind of what I was saying earlier about research and finding inspiration, you look at what the author was thinking about when they wrote it, but then of course the people that are bringing the story to life, they're now the most immediate version of that, right? How do they see their world and their space? And so I always take the opportunity. I was doing Meet Me in St. Louis at the paper mill. Of course, it's all about family and it's about history. I actually had the cast bring me photographs of their family, and I made them look, because the audience can't really see, but if I put them I made them a little sepia tone, I put like Photoshop little hats on, and I decorated the area going up the staircase with those pictures so that the cast would really feel like it's their home. When we did the opening games, the Sochi Olympics, worked with this brilliant choreographer named Danny Ezralo, who created this whole sequence of events about the rise of the Soviet Empire and man and machine, and all of these performers. And again, like Cameron was talking about, this was a massive amount of performers had to move and work with these giant machines that they were also manipulating. And so the set was actually the set was tailored to their bodies and to the specific dancers. And that was so thrilling, because when we did the number, you couldn't see where it was a person or where it was a body part or where it was an actual piece of machinery. So that's an extreme example, but always do we think about the cast. Only once was the set design, and then somebody needed a quick change. But I didn't blame the cast. That was the costume designer who should have told you that they needed a quick change. And I actually literally had to cut a wall apart so that we could have one. So that would be to answer that question. But
okay,
again, I wouldn't blame. That's not the cast's fault. Somebody.
Does anyone else want to answer Drew's follow-up? Is there an example?
Every now and then I have assumed that actors would be delighted to work on an uneven surface, and have been corrected in that opinion.
Yeah, that's true. They don't love a rake, but we do. So actually, I did something that, and this was Holiday Inn, a tap dance show. And we were through tech and doing previews, and the dancers started to complain that they were slipping on the floor. And then slipping on the floor. And finally, they were upset enough that one day at dinner, so at 4:45 dinner break, so no time to do anything for the lighting designer between the end of rehearsal and the start of the show, I see the loading door open at the side of the theater, and 6 prop guys wheel in, and this was on a dark floor. They wheel in giant strippers, like floor sanders, and just remove all the paint from the floor. So we had a nice, basically white deck for that performance, and almost from that point forward. So there's a crazy one. Our programmer, I think, walked out of the theater and said, "I'm not coming back."
They didn't just want to buy a gallon of that no slip. That really solves it with a mop.
They tried. They even tried.
I'm sorry that happened to
theater.
you. That's a rough day at the office.
It happens. Things happen. I can't believe we're running out of time. Look at this. Where's the time now? We're gonna go faster now because we're gonna get some more questions. So, Rob, I'm gonna go to you here. What has changed since the beginning of your career? What technology has made your career easier and harder? And this could be a quick one.
Lighting is the biggest change. I'm old enough to remember having to give half of the stage, or rather give half of the morning to somebody on a ladder so they could move and leako and point in the right direction. So you don't have to do that anymore. And I would say that's a significant change. Lighting, and what I was saying too about projection, that's really the biggest thing. It hasn't made it, I guess it's made it easier. I think it's made the collaboration process very different, because I feel like I actually have less conversations with lighting designers ahead of time than I used to, because it's not as specific as I need to squeeze this light in. Well, with some lighting designers, it still is.
I was going to say, I apologize because I feel like
don't apologize. I miss it. Usually it's just like I need 15 feet here. Leave me alone. So it's nice to actually have a conversation with a lighting designer who still thinks about the nooks and crannies of the set more specifically. But otherwise, I would say that's really the biggest difference in a collaborative sense.
Rachel, how about you? What has changed since you started?
I think, of course, all the technology has changed everything, right? So like my solid hand drafting skills, completely irrelevant.
Sure.
And that whole part of the process has changed how I make things. Of course, all of those tools are different. But in tech, the ability for lighting and sound and projection to program so differently and so quickly and create and try ideas and change ideas so quickly, and all of those hours of tech where we used to need to just wait, it's just a very different, much more nimble machine.
Mike?
Good word.
I'm gonna go left. I think accessibility to the industry as a whole has changed a lot. I think before it was like a trajectory or a path you had to take to kind of get introduced into a concert space or a design space. And I think with technology and the way education is now, it's a lot more easy for people like myself who might not have a traditional theater background to be able to like take things where we enjoy and learn and do the 1,000 hours a different way.
Right.
10,000 hours.
Cameron, how about you?
I think the communication piece has changed so much that I remember, going and getting drawings printed at Eveready, and Union Square and standing there and waiting. Remember that? And the seeing people, like, do you remember someone like calling your studio, like answering the phone or calling someone? And that is so far gone. And we do everything over email, which of course makes everything faster. But I feel like it adds a layer of anxiety because you're work on something and come up with this thing. We all have these little babies that we put out there, and then you're just like waiting to hear, where you used to get together the first time, you were spending much more time together. So I think it's a double-edged sword. Obviously the drafting is so much faster and you can make changes so much more quickly. I'm so curious what's going to happen to the scale model, if it's going to go away. I know there's we need them. I hope not either. But yeah, I think.
Yeah, I can't do it without one.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, it would be hard. Where does the time go? Okay, so let's talk about the COVID shutdown for another minute. Let's go back to that. Rachel, where were you when you were told to close up shop and walk away from what you do?
I was in my studio in New York, in the middle of a whole lot of things. And it was quite shocking. I actually had a friend in my studio I hadn't seen in many years came in, and my assistant just kind of peeked around the corner and said, "They did it. We're done."
Wow.
Wow. So I went up the street and probably did the most ill-advised thing, but went up the street and had drinks with the cast. They had just walked out of the rehearsal, and we walked across the street and had a big glass of bourbon and went home. But that's where I was.
It's funny. I think the show that I was working on, I did not go out, but the entire cast went out to have a drink afterwards too, which is probably probably not the best thing to do, but what are you going to do? Mike, how about you?
I was definitely in the middle of preparing 2 Coachella shows. So I was like, a month from Coachella. So yeah, that was gut wrenching, heart wrenching, all of the wrenchings.
So what happens to those shows? Do you get to? Do you think they'll do them eventually if they do Coachella next year?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully all the work wasn't to waste. But I think the way my brain kind of moves is kind of like in 2021, I might want to do something differently. So I don't know. We'll see. But I was in the middle of preparing for some very big shows.
Yeah, sure. Well, hopefully, someone's going to want a big show again sometime soon. Cameron, how about you?
I was similarly in the middle of, I wasn't in tech at the time, but I was preparing several really exciting shows, projects I was really invested in and excited about. So that was a painful aspect. Both of them, the idea is that they've been postponed and that they're going to be premiered in a later season. So I'm hopeful about that. I was also, I think it was on March 11th, I was having, a Zoom presentation for one of the projects. And we were just sitting there saying, well, okay, we'll present it. But 3 days later, it was canceled. So it was just this, it was a loss.
But you had a head start on Zoom. So there's that. Yeah. Rob, did you already answer this question?
No.
Fantastic.
I think you skipped them last time too.
No, I answered.
Oh, okay.
I was actually just coming back from Belgium, where we finished the fabrication of what is the latest Magic Mike Australian tour. But we built a venue, a pop-up venue, giant venue that is going to be shipped over to Australia for touring. And so we were all flying home from Belgium. It was being loaded onto shipping containers and sent, to Australia. And when it was in the middle of the sea, is when everything shut down. And it was interesting because we were doing a lot of projects, and they all kind of ran out of steam at like different. It was like at the fair when you're squirting a gun and trying to get the horses to go.
Sure. Yeah. For a while, we were still Zoom meeting about shows in the fall, and then slowly the lots of meetings that we were having on the phone or on Zoom, like fewer and fewer every week, and then we started getting those phone calls about the fall, and then this and the winter, and moving on.
That never stops being heartbreaking. Even the most recent one that just came, where it's 6 more months canceled. There was no surprise that phone call was going to come, but it still was just like getting kicked in the chest. It was terrible.
Yeah. But again, I think Cameron just said this, there are definitely a lot of things being canceled, but for the most part, I feel like it's on pause or postponed, and people will pick up. If it was a good idea before, maybe it's a good idea, hopefully it's a good idea.
I think a lot of stuff is going to change. I think the world has changed so much in 6 months. I think what people, the stories people want to tell, I think a lot of work might just slip away.
I wonder. We'll see. I hope it doesn't completely slip away. Just for the people who put in so much time preparing them.
Sure, of course.
But,
or we could all move. We could all move to Florida too.
They seem to just be open.
Yeah.
They just do it in Florida.
I saw a picture from a concert yesterday. It was several thousand people.
Oh God!
Really?
It's bizarre. Yeah.
That's just
So let's move to
what are they
Florida.
doing?
Right.
No,
They're not helping.
no, sir.
They're not helping
Nope,
us.
not going.
Worst case.
Well, you can't just move to Florida because, you know, as Rachel says, it's heartbreaking, but not just for Broadway, but for what Broadway is in that part of the city,
Absolutely.
right? I mean, it's you know, it's so vibrant, and now it's just so dead, and that is really heartbreaking. And when you think about that, I mean, to sit stagnant or dormant for 6 months will have an effect. I mean, for sure. You know, another 6 months, I should say.
And it's not just Broadway, and it's not just New York City. It's every city. There's these theaters downtown, but it's also tourism anywhere you go. I mean, the top of that list of problems is that there is no tourism anymore right now. So it's theater. It's everything that is related to tourism that's suffering at the moment until people are more comfortable getting on a plane or booking a hotel room. At least in a big city where it's crowded. Okay, moving on. A lot of production companies and producing companies have returned to online programming. Where does the designer fit, and do we have a role? And have you been working on anything? Mike, you've been working on something, I think. So what have you been up to?
Yeah, I think I'm in a space where people thrive. People long for content. So the content creation side of things hasn't really paused. But I would say in the aspect of me as a designer, I haven't designed anything and pretty much since the beginning of the year. So I fit into this space because I direct and produce content, but the production designer side of me has not worked since March.
Sure.
Mike, would you say that like some of the music videos that you're putting out are getting more, like not necessarily more views, but just giving more publicity because that's the only thing happening for that artist?
Yeah, I would say more so like performers are going, all the late night shows, they still have performances, right? But they're just being pre-taped instead of being, us in 30 Rock for a day or so. We're taping it and then sending it to the network. So that's still happening. But I think my role in that is less about how do you design in this space and more so about what is this thing you're trying to communicate over video, which usually is not me designing anything cool,
But it's creating something, at least.
Absolutely. No, I'm very grateful and fortunate to be in that. But it's nothing beats design. Nothing beats the constraints of having to design in a box per se and seeing people in their life. I would trade it for that. For sure.
Rachel, how about you? Are you doing any online set design for Zoom?
I mean,
like my background.
Yeah, right. No would be the answer to that. I'm working on a couple projects with Lisa, my partner, who's the director and a writer, and she's conceiving a number of things. And I think because of, because I'm always hanging around, I think she's an incredibly visual person, but she's always factoring in design into her thoughts. And we are conceiving of a couple of things that are that I will be part of, which I'm really excited about.
Cool. Yeah.
But it's not in the Zoom background world. It's more in the sort of Zoom production design world.
Yeah. Well, you're becoming a filmmaker now in a way. I mean, unless,
Yeah, definitely.
Cameron?
I haven't designed anything for Zoom or for any of the online performances. I will be designing something coming up. So I've been starting to research what are the kind of most interesting things. And there are some innovations that are happening. I mean, they're innovations to me. I don't know if other people already know about them, but there's some exciting things happening, moving it outside of it looking like this with people talking, So that's interesting. And, I've just been focusing more on kind of creating self-created ideas, work, trying to keep the motor going and the juices flowing while this is happening.
Rob, how about you?
I'm not doing any online work. I'm certainly not opposed to it. I think as Rachel's kind of indicating, I think that new ways of presenting content online is going to present itself. New ideas about how to tell stories online will present themselves, and what the design requirements of that will be is to be determined. But I don't have any connection to any of that at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Well, work aside, what have you guys been doing during the pandemic? Is anything you've ignored that you're finally getting to or want to get to? Cooking something you've never cooked before? New hobbies, pet projects? Anything that's surprised you or personal revelations? We're combining all of these into one giant question that you have a very short amount of time to answer. No, I'm kidding. Take all the time you want. Rob, we're going to stick with you. You can pass and come back.
No, not knowledge for its own sake, right? So I've I spent the time honing different skills. I'm actually doing a little home improvement project. We have this beautiful stone house that's been in Anita's family for generations, and now we are the occupants and trying to restore it to its former glory as well as renovate it. Yeah. So this is the bookshelf project that I'm doing. And in addition to that, I'm also learning new programs. This is a SketchUp. I made this in SketchUp. I've never used before. And so I was very excited. And then I realized I had to actually build it with real materials as well. So that's not going as well because it turns out I'm a good framing carpenter, but millwork is a whole different story. But I've been learning, how to do it, teaching myself and reading things and looking online, and I'm getting a great deal of satisfaction working with my hands. Years and years ago, I actually worked as a carpenter for the National Park Service, if you can believe it, doing restoration in the homes in Hyde Park, the old mansions there. And so it was wonderful work. I should have probably stuck with it. You just kind of get to quietly build beautiful things. Who doesn't love that? So I'm now trying to kind of go back to those roots, and the SketchUp thing, I'm being cavalier, but I'm also trying to expand my digital horizons as well as get back to hand drawing. As Cameron and Rachel both said, hand drafting is a thing of the past, and all those decades of doing it and getting really good at it. I've now actually started to. My hands are not what they were. I can't illustrate with a hand as quickly as I used to, and that's kind of very sad for me. So I'm trying to get that back and reconnect to that because I think it also helps me reconnect to my inspiration.
And Rachel, how about you?
The house has gotten some attention. It's true. There's been some cleaning. There's been some removal of unnecessary objects. But the main thing I've been doing is this work with a group that I've started with a bunch of designers called Design Action, where we are working really hard at trying to figure out what we can do about getting the American theater to be a little bit more of an equitable place, both in who's working with bringing more designers in, making more possible, getting out of the way, but also building a community across designers who don't always get to spend a whole lot of time together. So it's been an extraordinary few months working on that, and that's just the beginning of what promises to be a pretty long arc with that. So
that's amazing. And you're right. I mean, we don't get to spend time with each other, and we don't know each other. And there are so many people out there that I've never met. And I hear some names, and I don't hear their names you don't hear. But it's always I think it's a great idea to try to bring all of us together. We're all in the same we're all in the same business, even like whether you're in the union 829 or not. I mean, there's so many people who do what we all do, and I think it's a wonderful idea. So maybe we'll talk more about that. We'll bring you on for like a little 5-minute segment someday.
Yeah. Oh my God, that'd be great. It's been extraordinary.
Great. Yeah. Cameron, how about you?
Similarly, I've been focusing a lot on equity issues in the theater. Specifically, I teach at Brandeis University, and we've been sort of really thinking about our department, thinking about the theater in general, and how do we strip it down and build it back up in a way that makes it completely equitable for people of color, for women, for people who just haven't had a chance or have had less of a chance to succeed. And it's so fascinating to just ask ourselves questions of why do we do something this way, right? From a very basic thing like people who have to work, right? It's very hard for them to come to a rehearsal every night for, 7 hours, right? If people are working a job, how do we make it, and I'm talking about like college students, right? How do you make choosing to do a play, something that's not, choosing to then not be able to afford your life. So there's just like basic things like that are just not okay. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. And Rachel, I'd love to hear more about the work you've been doing. That sounds so important. And then, on the lighter side, I've just been reading a lot. I found that just, you tend to just read for the projects that you're on. So it feels a little like homework sometimes. And so this has been a time where I've just like dug back into reading. And I'm actually in Vermont right now. So I've been just, getting out of the city and trying to reconnect with nature a little bit.
Where are you? Where are you out of the city?
I'm in Putney, Vermont.
Putney, Vermont. Excellent. Is that the famous Putney that was featured in the New York Times a few weeks ago? I think that might actually be.
Was it? I saw that article, but I don't know if it was about Putney.
I don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah.
Mike, how about you?
I moved during the pandemic, so that decorating a new place has been fun, and doing all that, and then I think just getting organized and figuring out what do I actually like to do, and when things do start back up, what do I want my focus to be, and just getting things organized. I think when you're in go mode, you tend to just kind of put your head down and work. But I think now I've had time to like really sit and think like, where is this going? What do I want to do?
Let's stick with you. Wrapping it all up, Mike, what advice would you have for young people who want to do what you do?
I would say the biggest thing is research. We're in the information age, and information is so readily available now these days, whether it's YouTube or reading articles or like platforms like this. There's generally an interview or something you can read on something you're interested in. So I think the best advice I would say is immerse yourself in it and then figure out the steps you have to take. Don't try to skip any steps. But I think a lot of the mistakes that we all may have made might be something in an article or something you can read and not make that mistake if you do the research, if you will. So research would be my biggest thing.
I think that's a great answer. Rob?
I can't top that, Mike. That's a really good answer. I think, learn all you can, be patient. And I think that the honest advice I would give somebody is if there's anything else that you're interested in, you should do that. Only because this is a passion, right? I mean, this is the kind of thing, I think it's more akin to a vocation. I think we do it because we have to do it. For a lot of us, it's just, there's nothing else for us to do. So that's kind of what I would say after the research thing, because that was really good.
Cameron, how about you?
I would say specifically if you want to be a set designer, to study things outside of the theater. So read books, know about history, go to museums, immerse yourself in the world so you can bring something to conversations. That's lived experience. If you can, if you have the privilege of being able to traveling. So coming to the table with a wealth of knowledge and experience and heart, coming with an open heart and an open mind. I think I would give them the advice. And then on a practical level, it's so interesting because I have a student who is applying to grad school right now. And many of the programs are not accepting students next fall because they extended. And, I feel really, I have a lot of empathy for people at that juncture right now, or people who just got out of grad school, or people who are entering the field, because it's a dark time, except the hope that I think that when we come back, hopefully some things will shift in a way that's positive in terms of equity for people entering the field.
Yeah. Rachel, we went to you first last and now last.
I find Cameron's answer really inspiring. I think, for me, the most valuable class I ever took, I didn't take very many, but the most valuable class I ever took was actually a sculpture class. And, being out in the world, finding space, finding how people live in space, I think that's essential to design, and how you tell stories visually, but also see as much work as you can and see it from as many different places as you can see it.
Great advice.
there's there's like nothing more exciting than seeing something that you would have never, ever in a million years thought of.
Yeah.
And trying to just absorb that. And also, there's so many different ways to tell stories. So finding your tribe, right? Like finding the people whose work excites you and just stepping into all of that.
Yeah. And talk to people. Talk to all of our panelists, because they're all, as you can hear, they're all around. So drop them a line and see what excites them.
Everyone will write you back.
Yeah.
Eventually. Yeah.
Eventually.
Thank you all so much, Drew.
Yes, thank you. No, I mean, thank you, everybody. I know we went over. We always
did.
try not to, but
anything anybody wants to add or retract or
Go Lakers.
What's that?
Go Lakers.
Go Lakers.
Go Lakers. Go
Yeah,
Lakers.
we'll let Mike and Rachel get to the game.
Yeah, that's right.
You still got the second half.
Yeah, no, we're good.
But thank you, everybody, again. It was great hearing your perspective and being on the show. We'll see everybody next week. Jeff, any last words?
No, I just thanks so much to everyone. And we'll have you all back for a little 15-minute catch up in a couple of months, maybe not a couple of months, in several months, just to see how you are after things, get back up. We'll do a little recap reunion episode. Yeah. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, friends.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.